Thanks. Actually, if you were paying attention, you might have noticed in the middle of there the Nutriest High School theme song came from the Brady Bunch. Close Encounters of a First Client, and the fox hunting song. But I wrote that for a friend of mine who graduated from college. So it's fun. Welcome today. Thank you for the Stanford Club of Chicago for sponsoring us. Everybody here's a friend, and really appreciate you guys coming for support. This is Nora Williams.
So, hi everyone. It's great to be here. And today's program is definitely a study in contrasts. That was written in the 80s. I got my Stanford degree. It was in music, a veritable fuzzy, for those of you Stanfordites, in 1988. And the music we're going to play is definitely, we're going to show you the different contrasts. I'm playing two different instruments. We also have another piece with flute and piano. And we're going to be saying a few things about it. But this is, yeah, definitely a study in contrasts. We have first a Baroque, early Baroque Sonata, 4 short movements by Benedetto Marcello. And do you want to say anything about like the time signatures? We're going to contrast that with a Brahms song, which is a transcription. So those are the 2 classical pieces, and then we're going to hear more of Eric's music. So do you want to say a few words about the contrast here?
Well, I mean, part of what we're contrasting is one of the things, the biggest thing that's changed in the last 300 or 400 years in music is people's willingness to use tension, people's willingness to use dissonance. And you go back in time, music was songs, or music was holy music. Music had a few other jobs to do, but not that many. And there was, especially in the formal settings in churches and school, it was very formal, and there was very little room for tension, very little room for contrast. Fast forward to today, where you flip on the radio and you hear people, dropping the F-bombs about being, pimps and prostitutes and drug dealers, and that sort of maximum tension. You hear people screaming into microphones. So that's sort of, that's been the trajectory of music over the last 3 or 4 years. It's sort of amazing. So when you try to write acoustic music, classical music, playing with tension. And what's the right amount of tension for a modern unit? It's sort of an interesting question. So a lot of what you're going to hear today is experiments with dissonance, experiments with time signature, and we thought it would be very interesting to play some Baroque music that follows all the rules. And so if we're going to start with Marcello, and just so you know, this is somebody who wrote. You know more about him historically than I do, but you'll clearly hear he followed the rules, and it's beautiful music. But as you contrast it, think about that compared to, Cardi B or something like that.
This next piece by Brahms is short. It's a song, von Ewiger Liebe, and this is a transcription. It's really beautiful. It does feature the piano. I mean, the piano has a lot to do in this because Brahms has so much like he was a pianist, and it's so rich and incredible. And something that you may not know is that Eric purchased a piano for this event. Wow. And I'm like, okay, you want to get a new piano? Great idea. So,
I was looking for an excuse to do it for a long, long time.
So anyway,
thank you.
You found a good excuse, and so he's like, oh yeah, I talked to Thomas Sills on the pianoforte. I'm like, I know Thomas, and lo and behold, Thomas is here. So Thomas, could you tell us a few words about this piano?
I'm on the spot. So it's about 20 years old. The model is a DC6. The D stands for disklavier. We actually don't need Eric at the piano.
Really?
It could play all by itself. It has a player mechanism built in. But it's wonderful for composing because it has a MIDI capability built in. It's 7 feet. That's why it sounds like a real piano. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it
Thank
does.
you.
It's
Yeah.
great. I remember you.
Okay. Anything you want to say about this?
Well, this next piece is Brahms. We're fast forwarding how many years?
Oh, a few.
150.
Yeah.
We're fast forwarding, approximately 150 years,
Yeah.
and you'll
Yeah,
see
maybe more.
Brahms is still a follower of the rules, but you all see a lot more creativity with harmony. There's some 4 against 3 stuff in here that gave me nightmares. And so be gentle when you're listening to it. And but you can see just how much has changed in terms of, Brahms, the master at the top of his game. But just listen to how different his presentation of the music is. I'm going to go for it. The page turn is the most interesting part of this piece. Although you want to do me a favor?
Yeah.
Here's the thing: I've got the thing in 2 halves, and I'll get down here. Just make this half go away. Just make the thing go away. Yeah. Just when we get about to here, because not too fast.
You take it away.
Is that about right?
Yeah.
Okay.
switch instruments.
We're going to switch instruments. We welcome Tim McNamara, a local flute saxophonist, flutist. What else do you play? Clarinetist?
Yes, I guess. I mean, I don't know. Depends who's listening.
And I'll give him a chance to set up I'll use this opportunity to say a couple things. One thing people have asked me about is how this started, and I played for a long time through my 20s, and then I took a long break to do sort of life cycle stuff. But back about a year and a half ago, I started writing again, and I was really looking for an opportunity. So this was kind of, the group decided to sort of goose me, call my bluff. So you guys are all calling my bluff, because I actually said I wanted to perform this stuff in public, and so here I am. Thank you so much again. The next pieces that you're going to hear, two more pieces that are actually originals of mine. These are both 2019 pieces. And what you're going to hear right away is there's a lot of my fascination with dissonance and the resolution of dissonance. I don't know if you got a chance to see this cute little article I cut out, but I make a lot of use, and you actually heard it in the rag also, of an interval called the tritone, and it's a major fourth, and it was absolutely forbidden in early music because it was considered so chaotic and so destructive to the ear that virgins would immediately turn into satanic whatever, and angels would fall from the sky and we'd all die. But the Devil's Interval, and you may want to read this, it's cute, I won't read you the whole thing, but basically the title of this article is called "Why is the Tritone Nicknamed the Devil's Interval?" To the point where in Latin it was called the, what's the name? The Diabolo Musica, or how does it go? The Diabolus in Musica, the devil in music. And that's the interval, this interval. And if you remember the end of the piece that I did, that's tritones. But just in my own defense, I mean, if you remember Maria from West Side Story, that's tritones. Purple Haze, Jimi Hendrix, that's tritones. Wagner had his timpani tuned to tritones. I mean, this isn't just something I made up. But anyway, now Tim's a local player, and he had the joy of trying to play this on the flute. And one of the things you probably never thought about with new music is the composer goes into his cave and writes music and thinks about how great it's going to sound. But then somebody has to hand it to a real musician and say, "Can you play this?" And quite often the answer is no. What the freak did you just write? No human being could possibly play this. And so Tim has been an amazingly good sport, because first of all, he helped me turn this music into something we were actually going to play. And then also, I won't speak for him, I'll let him talk about it a little bit, but Tim, could you introduce yourself and talk?
Hello! Hi, everyone. Tim McNamara. No relation to the famous Robert McNamara, Fog of War, who I believe was a Stanford guy. Was that true? I don't have an affiliation with Stanford. I'm hoping I'm going to get some sort of certificate after we complete this today, if it goes well. So, he has written, like I think he's trying to say here, this music is certainly at the edge of what I can do, and we've worked on it a lot, so let's all just hold a moment of silence in our hearts and hope that it goes well. And but Eric, ironically or strangely coincidentally, he and I met in a dorm room at the University of Illinois. He doesn't remember it, but I kind of remember it because I'm a saxophone player as well, and he was a better saxophone player than I was. I was like, who is that dude? Man, he sure can really get around on the saxophone. And it turns out, because he's sort of an epic piano player as well, so, I don't know what I've been doing with my life, but this guy is like how about a round of applause for this man? Mathematician, attorney, music composer, hoster of Salon concerts. I couldn't even get it together to rake the leaves today, so wow. But anyway, this music is very challenging. It's tonal with some aspects of dissonance, like he has talked about, and for us, we just have to go at a safety first, as the great Schulte said to his musicians. In other words, let's play it in some sort of reasonable tempi, where we know that we're going to be able to leave the stage with our heads and chins held high. We want to slink out of here, okay? So we have to address where our recording.
And by the way, when he said some of these incredibly high notes, feel free to applaud, because you
You don't have to applaud. So let's not put the bar too high here. Let's hit them first. Sorry. We don't talk this much at the Symphony Center, I don't think, but it's fun. It's kind of actually helps
It's good to talk.
It's good to talk. Thank you.
Exactly.
You can tell my wife that.
That's better.
How about giving me an A, please? Yeah, the piano tune. This is quite an epic piano tune, right? It's not only an acoustic piano, but it also is MIDI, musical interface, digital interface, something like that.
Something like that. We'll ask Thomas to explain that.
Yeah, well, we should talk about that.
Good?
Yeah, I think so. All right. Yeah, but let's think of our.
You guys are wrong. Okay? Okay. You got it, like that? We do that?
Yeah.
Okay. specifically to try to kill Tim. This may be the this is probably the hardest piece of flute music I've ever seen, and I couldn't possibly begin to play it, and it would win. But Tim has a chance to sing with it. It's also in 5/4 time, just to make it even more. There you go.
Dave Brubeck was from near Stanford, wasn't he? The famous.
That's right.
Wasn't he?
Is he from California? I didn't know.
Yeah, he's in California.
Okay, so.
Tell him the name of this, because it's kind of interesting.
Oh, well, this tune is called El Paso, and the irony of this thing is I wrote this long before that horrible incident in El Paso. I wrote it just because I was in El Paso, but it's really strange because, you know, that huge, dramatic, awful thing happened, but there was actually no relation, you know, there was no relationship to this in the piece. But all my, if you're interested, I can also talk about how I actually wrote this, because I literally wrote this music on iPads. I didn't write this at a piano, I didn't write this at a flute. I wrote this music actually drawing sticks and balls into an iPad using software called Notion 6. And it's a fascinating process, because you can write for many instruments at once, play it back immediately, get the immediate feedback. And it's, especially for somebody like me who doesn't have that gift of perfect musical memory or perfect pitch or anything like that, it really sort of raises my game. I like to think about it as sort of a crutches for a musically disabled guy, but it got me where I needed to go. So anyway, okay, so this is El Paso, the second movement.
Yes, our relationships are good.
We doing good?
All right.
Okay. What do you think? Da 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 da. Is that about right?
Uh huh.
Da 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 da. 1, 3, 4, 5. Now this last movement, I wrote a piece that was too hard for me to play. But you know, once again, if Brahms can do 4 canons 3, why can't I, right? So those are sort of famous last words. But in this one, Tim is well, this is kind of a role reversal piece, because in this one, Tim is the foundation. Tim is the kind of melodic, rhythmic.
First wrong move right there was just.
That
was a bad move, I said
okay.
to him under my breath. But
yeah. But anyway, so he's the foundation. You know, basically he's the bass player, and I'm the soloist in this one. But just drink some extra wine, because this is the hardest thing I've ever tried to play, and I got no excuse because I wrote it. Anyway. Okay, what's that? Is that
that's good.
2, 3. Thanks. Well, we're going to bring Nora back to play the violin.
yes.
And I'm going to let her talk about her experience playing this one. But this piece is actually called San Diego. And
So this is our finale, right?
this is our finale. So let's see. I'll let you talk to this. But what else was there anything I wanted to say? I think I told you everything I wanted to say. I'm very curious to what you have to say about this piece.
Okay, well, I have something to say about this piece. Okay, so this piece was originally written for flute and piano, right?
Yes, that's exactly right.
So Eric tried to get a couple of flutists to play, and to no avail. So he's like, can you do it on viola? I'm like, no, I cannot do this on viola. But violin is more in the range. So mostly I perform on violin more in the jazzier kind of a setting, more the popular music, etc. As I do more serious classical on viola. So this kind of works because this piece kind of has a jazzy feel to it. And it's cool. It is very cool, and I liked it immediately. It is very brainy, and it is very like rhythmic. But back to that tritone thing, like pianists can look at the piano and find where the tritones are. They can look. Okay, the violin is actually kind of an A. Okay, the violin is tuned in fifths, right? And a tritone is just a half a step less than a fifth. Okay, that is hard on the ears. It's hard to play, and it's like I like tritones. I do like tritones because there's so much tension, and then it releases into something beautiful. But like Eric just likes tritones for the sake of tritones. So it was like, you know, practicing. I'm like, well, I like Eric. I like this piece, and that's why I'm going to practice this. But it's just like, you know, when you're practicing, you're just like, God, I just get strangled like Richard Strauss for writing this. It's so difficult. And it's like when you have a living composer, you're just like, oh. But you know, we are nice to each other. So it's cool. It's quirky. It has some great energy to it, and I think you're gonna like it. So yeah. Once again, yeah. It always kind of baffles me when composers are just like it's hard for them to play. Like, really, why'd you write it? Why did you write something that like sounds hard but is easy? But I'm not a composer at all. So anyway, here we go. So. Oh yeah. And you'll notice there's quite a recording setup here. So you may or may not know, composers sometimes have a hard time getting people to play their music when they're freshly composed. And so when there is an event for us to do this and actually rehearse it and practice it, it's really wise to get it recorded so that you can have feedback. And just in case anybody wants to hire you to commission a piece, you can tell them, here's a sample of my work.
That's right.
So.
And by the way, Mike, where did Mike? No, Mike's not even here.
No, he's right
Mike, can you just, Mike McCullough, by the way, is doing all the recording. And can you just give yourself a tiny bit of plug here? Can you just plug yourself for 1 second?
Yeah. Chicago area drummer, getting into the recording stuff. I'm glad to be here. Not a Stanford alumni, Tulane alumni. I don't know if anyone's been to New Orleans. Excited for this opportunity. It's nice you guys are all on the recording. We're going to hear everything that you guys say, so it'll be nice. But glad to have this opportunity. Yeah.
Great.
Thank you guys.
Right, so yeah, this is our final, and then if we have any questions afterwards, we are happy to field questions or talk about our instruments or compositional technique or rehearsal, whatever.
Whatever you want. Okay, great.
So how fast are we going?
San Diego? Not very. Okay. Is that okay? Is that too slow?
That's fine. No, I think that's fine.
Ready? Everybody ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay.
that called San Diego? Did you write that in
Just
San
literally,
Diego?
I wrote it when I was in San Diego. And it seemed like the right idea at the time. I was actually listening to a construction site out the window. So you can see a lot of that, the original derivation for that was machinery, industrial machinery. And it kind of progressed from there.
It got a little jazzy.
It got a little jazzier as
we
it
went
went,
along.
but it started with the basic premise was just the.
Other question, so you're a mathematician also?
Well, I studied enough math to know I don't know any math. Yeah.
So do you use math in your compositional?
Well, probably unconsciously all over the place. Consciously, no, but I do have, I do like the odd time signatures, and I do like the odd intervals, so I'm sure there's something there for sure.
Well, yeah, and then we got into a long discussion about tempered versus non-tempered tuning.
Yeah.
And then, so like the mathematician is like, wait a minute, because pianos are tempered, right? So maybe, Thomas, explain what that means.
Yeah, it's a bit complicated, but
Can you
basically,
yeah.
basically a piano cannot be tuned, is really the thing, because the natural sequence of overtones is such that it cannot be divided into 12, and somehow we have to fit all the intervals into 12 semitones on the piano. So there are compromises that are made. So effectively, when you listen to a fifth on the piano, it's not exactly a fifth, and a third is not exactly a third. There are always beats, which are the way that tuners listen to dissonance. It creates a beat, and whether it's a fast beat or a slow beat determines how far you are from that interval being perfect. That's just sort of the beginning of an explanation.
Okay.
But it's,
Right, well, and the thing is, like, string players, if we're playing string quartets, we don't have to temper. So the thing is, I mean, from the highest violin note to the lowest cello note, it won't usually work because it gets out of tune with itself as the further away you go. But like when you're playing string quartets, you can bend the intonation on a fiddle or a viola or a cello. And so the thing that's so cool is that like I've played all string music where I'm holding one note, but the chord changes, so I'll have to bend the note when the chord shifts in order for it to sound like, so you can know where the harmony's going. Pianists can't do that. They're just stuck with what's there. And when we play with them, we're tuning as much as possible to what they're doing.
maybe a little add-on to that is that at the time of Marcello, for example, there was no equal tempered tuning like we do on pianos now. And so typically those composers composed in a few tonalities that were not too far apart from one another, and those were tuned more cleanly, more pleasingly to the ear. And so that makes it extra difficult for Nora, because she'd probably like to play it like Marcello wrote it, but the piano is saying, no, you gotta go over here. So,
Right. And that in those days it would have been a harpsichord or a forte piano, probably.
yes.
Right.
In a non-equal tuning.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So we could go, and so then, like, there were a few times we started rehearsal starting to talk about this. I'm like, Eric, if you keep talking with this mathematical perspective, we're not going to play. Because Eric was like, no, well, I can't understand why it's like they don't, the intervals aren't cut exactly according to physics or whatever. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, this is why, yeah.
You had a question, sorry.
I was just going to ask, how long did it take you to create each composition?
Well, I mean, the initial seed of it goes down very, very quickly. I mean, the initial seed of these pieces goes down in a day or two. But, like everything else, the last 10% takes forever. And, if you really had a good ear today, you could realize the last 1 or 2% hasn't taken place yet. But, part of playing something in front of people is just like, oh my God, I did that, and you got to fix it. But, the answer to your question is the 80% was knocked out in a day or two for each one.
Right, but I mean, that's why we do these kind of things, because they're more like a workshop, so you can actually get feedback. And like, when you have a live performance, like, well, how about this, or how about this, or like, could you change this note?
Yeah.
And so it's a lot easier to do that than, hey, Beethoven, can you like just change this note? Like, no. But
Yeah, like when I stop getting death threats from Tim, I know I've made the piece playable. So,
For both of you, is music your primary profession?
for me it is.
not me.
Yeah.
And what's your well, what do you do and what do you do?
Well, I'm in finance. I'm trained as an attorney, but I went into finance. So.
And what do you do in music?
So I'm a freelancer. So I have a studio in the Fine Arts Building. So I my own little music company. So I teach adults and kids. Well, not kids, sorry, teens and adults. And then I also freelance, I concertize, I do all kinds of things on violin and viola. So orchestra, quartet, ballet, you know, opera orchestra, bands, whatever. Like, so I have a broad taste in music. And Chicago's a great town. I grew up in the Bay Area. And I love the Bay Area, but it's not as cold as Chicago. And in the 6 months of cold weather, what do people do? They stay indoors and they listen to music. So, and the price of real estate is a little more reasonable out here as well. So, and the Chicago audiences, I mean, the Midwest, there's a lot of arts and culture, and people appreciate it. And there's, I mean, the music community is amazing. I mean, I haven't seen Tim in a while on a gig, I realize. But you get to see a lot of people. It's a wonderful community. I mean, you could go to music performances in multiple genres, like every day of the week. I have students, one of my students, Jennifer, is here, and some of my students are like, yeah, I could go to something every single night of the week. I'm like, yeah, I know, it would be great if I weren't performing or, you know, wanting a night of rest. But it's a great place to be as a musician. It's a great place to be.
Yes. You know, I had a question. When you start composing, do you have, except for putting the music together, do you have a vision of something that you want to express?
Well, for me, it's about a feeling, it's about a mood. I usually start with a riff. I mean, I'm sort of more like a jazz musician or a songwriter. I start with a riff and a mood, and then I start thinking about structure. But I mean, the difference between me and Brahms, for example, is he can think about structure at the scale of a symphony. You know, I think about structure at the scale of something, you know, 64 bars long or something like that. But yeah, that's it. You know, it's very much about a riff, and then about a mood, and then about and you know, I'm very much about call and response, and very much about story arc. I think about my pieces. I'm trying to tell a story, and it's got to have a story. It's got to start somewhere. It's got to go somewhere. There's got to be moments of tension, moments of relaxation, beauty, conflict, and so that's the kind of where my head's at.
Yeah, one of your pieces, when I was listening to it, I felt like I was somehow walking in the wood, in the forest, and there was just.
Well, that's a huge compliment because if my music took you somewhere,
yes, it
then thank you. That's great. Thank you.
A lot of emotion, definitely.
Yeah.
A lot of emotion.
Right.
Yeah.
Question?
When you started using the iPad system, did that change the way you wrote music?
It definitely did. That's a great question. It definitely did, and I was thinking about this a lot because there's a game that I play called Why Am I Not Mozart? I mean, obviously I'm not Mozart, but the more interesting question is, why am I not Mozart? And let's say, and we're back to the mathematician again. The mathematician would say, well, there's 11 reasons why you're not Mozart. You can't imagine fully formed pieces of beautiful music in your head. You can't remember vast amounts of music and then write it down. You can't hear the way other instruments. I mean, there's many reasons I'm not Mozart. But the interesting thing is a couple of the reasons I'm not Mozart actually get solved by the iPad. I mean, which is interesting, right? Because one of the reasons I'm not Mozart is because I can't imagine in my head how multiple lines of music are going to sound together. Well, you put that into the computer, you hit play, you immediately get instant feedback on how 4 or 5 instruments playing a line together are going to play. Well, that's one example. Another example is just literally the ability to think of something and then hang on to it long enough to get it down, which sounds trivial, but I think most people who are not Mozart would tell you that 90% of their good ideas go into the air. you know, they don't get recorded. And so there's lots of, you know, so yeah, it's fascinating, and it also just it makes it the physical chore of writing music. You have copy and paste. You basically have a word processor available for notes. And it also just makes it so much easier, less of a chore. You end up doing it more. You just become more productive because you don't, I don't know if anybody's here. Has anybody here ever transcribed music?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, transcribing music the old school way, you're writing, you write till your hand's about to fall off, till it's a race between your eyes get tired, your hands get tired first. And it's changed a lot. And also, if you look at Hollywood, if you look at the movies, you can tell that people have become unbelievably more prolific.
Right.
You turn on the average television show, you turn on the average radio show, you turn on the average documentary film, they have original scores.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when in the history of music would some random documentary film on PBS have an original score? I mean, and that's only possible because of these tools. People are so much more productive composing them.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's changed a lot, actually. It's a good question.
That's good.
Oh, Don.
So, I have 2 daughters taking piano, and I'm wondering when in your life you realized that you were becoming a composer rather than a player, or in addition to a player.
Well, I think everybody's a composer until somebody tries to convince them they're not.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
I mean, I think that's the honest answer. Yeah.
But some people have a natural affinity for it. And some people, the people that I know, and jazzers fall into this because jazz is improvisation, is composing on the spot. And so, jazz is, a lot of composers. Classical, except for the organ, the church organist, there's not that much freelance improvisation really going on.
Maybe on the guitar.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, for example, in my particular case, I started playing classical music, taking lessons. I started playing in rock bands and jazz groups when I was pretty young. And, somebody just, wants you to improvise, play a solo. So you're like, so, you fake it till you make it. But
You brought that back to classical afterwards? Is that?
Yeah, it's all full circle. I mean, we're all creatures of what we've learned, what we studied. I've studied classical music, I've studied jazz, I've played rock, and it's all kind of all in there together, I think. And the examples of the tritone examples were Bernstein, Wagner, and Jimi Hendrix. So it's kind of fun to bring things together. Question?
Typically, how many revisions do you get to before you get your first death right? Is there an entitlement level? Or?
Yeah, really. Well, the funny thing is with the computer, you're sort of infinitely revising all the time. So, you just got to look over your shoulder a lot.
But it's alive though, which is pretty cool because Beethoven and Mozart standards. I mean, you have different interpretations of them, but when you have a living composer, you're going through this cycle of evolution faster, and it's cool to be have an idea or how about this or how about this, and have the composer go, oh yeah, what do you think? Well, it's cool.
Yeah, I mean, for example, one of my favorite composers is a guy named Chick Corea, and he's been playing now for. I don't know, I think he's been performing professionally, 50 years, 60 years now?
Yes.
And, there are pieces he wrote 40 years ago that he played at Carnegie Hall, and he plays them through the decades. And you can listen to those pieces of music. I once sat down on Spotify and listened to the same piece of music played by Chick Corea, 20 years, and just listen to that one piece of music evolve, and it's great.
We heard
it's
him
really
on
cool.
Friday.
Oh, really? What do you play?
A lot of things.
Classical or jazz?
Jazz. It was trio with Chris McBride.
Oh, wonderful.
Actually, part of it was a Scarlatti Sonata.
Yeah. Well, yeah, he's...
He played very well.
Works.
Yes.
Good.
You said a few moments ago that one of the benefits for you of playing before an audience is that you hear things that you want to change.
Right.
Can you, without putting you on the spot, can you give us an example of
Well, I'll give you a perfect example. I mean, Tim is an amazing player, but you heard some of the stuff where he was going da-da-da, da-da-da, at the very low end of the instrument. And that's so hard to play, and he played it. But it's almost distracting because when the technical challenge gets in the way of just the music, you know, it's not supposed to draw attention to itself as challenging, it's supposed to just be flowing. And to me that's a compositional error, because I wrote some music that's so difficult to play that it draws attention to itself. Or, you know, or some of the stuff at the high register. It's you know, to me, there's a balance. And actually, Tim actually helped me in the pieces, because some of the stuff I originally wrote was just simply, you know, we got in this argument. You know, if you practice enough, can you get it, or should I change it? And in a couple places he said, no, you should just change it. But, so, you know, that's the kind of thing. Question?
When you hum the tune walking around the house?
Especially the one in 5/4 with the tritones. Yeah.
I do.
I hate to admit it, but I actually sort of do now. Yeah.
No, I do. I mean,
do?
This piece. I mean, as soon as first I you know, yeah, it totally keeps playing in my mind. So, like, to me, that's the mark of a worthy composition.
Yeah.
That means it's danceable.
What made you decide the orchestration, the instrumentation?
Well, the flute and piano was the original choice I made because I played the flute and I played the piano, so I felt like I understood enough about both instruments. But then when I met Nora, we decided we wanted to do something with violin and piano, as we actually did discuss which piece to try to bring to the violin, and you know, we decided to do San Diego, and knowing that it would be quite a challenge because it's not naturally written for the violin at all, which sort of is part of what's interesting about it, I think, the way we played it. And yeah, that's the answer.
But it's worthwhile. You know,
yeah,
I mean,
you know,
challenge
cool.
is good. Do you know what I mean? And like that's the thing with newer music. It's like you can't rely on patterns. I mean, there's some patterns, but you have to like come up with new patterns, which creates new neural pathways, which is good for us. Yes. So it's like, you know, especially at least for me, it's like I want to be challenged like that. So it's like, you know, we'll play it again, and it'll continue to evolve, and you know, it's fun.
It's fun. No, it's a lot of fun. Yeah.
So what's next for you? Like,
what's next for me? I'm going to drink wine. What's next? That's an interesting question. Well, I've been alternating between writing pure electronic music, and you know, kind of rock music, and this. And it's an interesting question. I don't know the answer. I mean, Nora and I are going to get a chance to play together a little bit in a few weeks, and it's nice because you know when you work this hard to get some pieces up, it's nice to play them more than once. Yeah. Get a chance to do that. But I don't know. That's good. That's great. That's the next question answer. I don't know the answer.
Good. Well, I think there's still some food and drinks.
Oh, please.
So please,
Food, drink.
Yeah,
Thank you.